Hello friends, thanks for checking out the video. Be sure to like and subscribe as it greatly helps out the channel and I'd really appreciate it. Enjoy! The next article, Conservatism and Infrequent Mask Usage, right? So perhaps one of the biggest, if not the biggest, besides even going out, is, the pandemic behavior is wear a mask, not to wear a mask, when can you wear it, and, where people, right? I remember may have been a year ago when they were saying, oh, technically you should be double masking. And at that
hmm
point, people more or less just, scoffed at that and are
hmm
like, yeah,
It was
no.
you don't have to wear a mask, then you should wear a mask, then you should wear two masks.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was like there was we had mixed messaging from public health and government officials entire pandemic.
And
Yeah,
not to
yeah,
mention the whole, well, what kind of mask
yeah,
should it be,
yeah,
right? Because there, tons of companies, for better or for worse, made a huge profit
yeah,
selling masks, and some
yeah.
of these masks didn't actually
hmm
do anything,
hmm
right? Or it's like, oh, I'm wearing a face, the face shields, all those kind of things, and they're
hmm
like, those help, but only in conjunction with a
hmm
mask. They don't replace it. So
Yeah,
yeah.
our mask study didn't really make any necessary claims about the benefits of masks because you are right.
Mhm.
You had the N95 mask that seemed to work really well, but does seem to be some questions about other types of masks. But I think for us the important thing here was that this was a public health recommendation, so
Mhm.
it is interesting to see which segments of society. In this case, we were like actually looking at county level data, so we weren't looking at individuals anymore,
Right.
but looking at like which county populations were masking up more than others, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
well, and especially,
yeah,
y'all,
yeah,
mentioned or emphasized the three pillars, and one
yeah,
of which we
yeah,
already talked about,
yeah,
right,
yeah,
is
yeah,
Republican political leadership, like
yeah.
that specific leadership. So, how, and it's not just, at the time, President Trump,
hmm
it was governors,
yeah,
right?
yes.
So how were, you know, governors emphasizing, and especially, did you see anything, or what did you see rather, for those, say, if it was a Democratic governor, especially in states where they were, a lot closer as far as like, you know, huge Trump voters,
hmm
as well as Republican governors like Florida versus more, what, when they say what political like battleground states.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, um, you can see kind of layers of political authority, and you can have the federal authority, which was essentially represented by Trump, and then you had the state authorities that were essentially represented by these governors. And I think a lot of the Republican governors took their cues from Trump as a leader because having a battle with Trump was something that was like good for the Republican governor. But you also have some Republican governors of blue states that complicated some of this
Mhm.
in terms of their disagree with Trump and but still politically viable in their own state. And these Republican government states are actually really, so there was some complexities there. But the main finding was really about counties that had majority support for Trump essentially. So if Trump essentially pretty share of support county in terms of um, uh, then they less likely to mask up or had higher rates of infrequent mask usage, right? And so that's at a
Mhm.
population level. The first study we talked about was at the level. It's really interesting to think about when you start to move up to the county level, you start to see um, county populations characterized by political conservatism or Trump support in particular. Um, so following your in terms of the mask usage.
Yeah, and on that, you even, again, looked at, what kind of religious denominations,
hmm
and predominantly y'all looked at Protestantism, and I think one of your other studies as well, you also looked at evangelicals, but really again, we were kind of talking about that, added power to authority, right?
hmm
Because, there's going to be certain rhetoric, and that seemed to be a major role, is like, what are the phrases to use? You also talked about what some might say, like, if you deviated or even went against what, Trump was saying at that time, then they'd be like, oh, that's political
Hmm.
suicide. Or I saw recently an ad or a campaign ad, one of the states up north, but now they're talking, calling them rhinos, Republicans
Yeah,
in
and
name
name only.
only. And it's fascinating. Like
Yeah.
that whole thing's come about just because, like, it's, well, you're not for Trump, again, it's, to me, it is really interesting just that you could have such a divide from within.
Mhm.
And again, then all this, we're going to talk about media consumption, um, how that just essentially it exacerbates the issue,
Mhm.
the infrequent, like it justifies my, right beliefs. And part of it is like, are these individuals, right, or at least, especially as this study is concerned, these larger counties, states, are they going in with these beliefs, right? Are they getting impacted? And then you hear basically this kind of information. And I even was questioning, reminding me of like more egregious, super far right media,
Mhm. Mhm.
QAnon,
Mhm.
good old Alex Jones.
Mhm.
Like, does that make people, might start off as like, yeah, follow Trump, but does that perhaps make them more vulnerable,
Mhm.
or to start going down, what we deem conspiracy theories?
So what we learned in the first study, when we actually directed personal right wing media consumption, we did include right wing media consumption, Fox News, OAN, some of these
Hmm.
uh, sources. And what we found is there's actually kind of an inconsistent association at the individual level between the right wing media consumption, pandemic lifestyles. And really, what was driving it was your Republican identification, identifying as a conservative, and then and support for Trump. The right wing media consumption was very inconsistently related. And basically, what that suggests to us is that even though we had a lot of concern about the misinformation about the pandemic and about health lifestyles that was being pushed by Fox News and related sources, basically there's not really there's unlikely it's unlikely to have a causal relationship to any of your behaviors. It's really just a selection that certain political people with certain political views are drawn to those media sources. But it's those previous political views they bring um, uh, to those media sources that then echo what they already kind of believe, right?
Right.
And so really there's no association, really no clear association between right wing media consumption and pandemic lifestyles after you account for if somebody is a Republican, is a conservative, essentially. So
Right.
so that is some conflicting evidence between our two studies. The study we're talking about now at the county level,
Mhm.
we did find that Google searches for Fox News, for example, interest in Fox News was associated with lower mask usage, right, at the county level. But our individual level study says that that personal right wing media consumption, isn't really doing much. So
Wow.
this is the complexities and contradictions between even uh, studies that I've produced,
Mhm.
right, and why it's always important. Makes theoretical sense to look at the individual level if you're aggregate level. Um, so that I think what we can really hang our hat on is that there's something about political conservatism, there's something about religious conservatism, conservative Protestantism, evangelical
Mhm.
Christianity, Christian nationalism, which we'll maybe talk about.
Mhm.
There's something about those that are consistently related to your pandemic lifestyles. Media consumption, in my opinion, is inconsistent. Is
Okay.
inconsistent.
And I wonder if that's because, again, kind of made mention at the
Yeah.
start of the stream is social media, right? It's
Yeah.
like, so I have a TV in
Yeah.
my house, but I never use it to actually watch TV, right?
Hmm.
Any sort of information consumption is more or less off my phone
Yeah.
or off the laptop, right?
Yeah.
I know most media, Fox News, CNN, all that, they try and do small clips, trying to
Yeah.
change the game. But
Yeah.
I wonder if that's in part why, because they don't have the kind of
That.
traction, or it's for
Hmm.
perhaps mainly still just a certain demographic, perhaps it's older Americans.
Yeah. That could be. That could be another interesting way of measuring kind of media consumption, because we asked, like, what was your major source of news. We did allow for people to write in if they didn't
Okay.
identify with like major networks, right?
Hmm.
And so some people did write in, like Alex Jones and wrote with a Drudge Report, some other
Oh,
ones,
yeah.
and so we like kind of hand coded some of these as right wing media consumption.
Mm.
But you're right. I think that could always do a better job of capturing. You could do a whole study on just different types of media consumption,
Yeah.
different styles of media consumption. Because you're right, maybe people that focus on the TV, maybe get certain types of messages. People that focus on internet, maybe get.
Hmm.
Then also you have people like my dad that focuses on radio.
Oh,
That
yeah.
gets
Yeah.
information from the radio,
Hmm.
and and maybe where you're getting it. It not it's not it's it does kind of lead you to certain types of voices that you may not hear.
Yeah, you,
Yeah.
you know, and not to mention if it's like on internet or
Yeah.
even I know there's some on like,
Yeah.
Snapchat,
Yeah.
it's like here's your
Yeah.
news in under 2 minutes. Here's
Yeah.
all the big things. Okay, great. I'm all
Yeah.
caught up with what's happening in the world.
Yeah.
There's also, comment sections, right? And
Yeah.
of course, I urge caution anyone delving into the comment sections
Mhm.
because it gets nasty real
Mhm.
fast. So yeah, I think that's to me that's like, yeah, real interesting. Is there a difference, on impact based on the kind of like how you consume your media?